I've had the luxury of speaking with countless epic pillars of the industry, and I've shared these moments with you every step of the way. From folks who created companies to the developers who ushered in an age of excitement for us in our youth, what about the folks that announced our accomplishments live in the middle of a match? I've done that, and it's eternally humbling to be afforded simply an hour to talk to someone about their contributions to the video gaming industry and how they affected it in their own way. I didn't know who I wanted to speak to next. I had a few options, but one person in particular always piqued my interest. Growing up, I played Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. In fact, everywhere I turned, Rare was kicking ass putting out quality platformers on the Nintendo 64, and I wanted the chance to talk to someone who made those melodies, those memorable songs, and that person was Grant Kirkhope. What's up, everybody? My name is Fortefyre, and today I have the luxury of sitting down and talking to the guy who all but composed our childhoods, especially if we grew up in the 90s, if we grew up with the Nintendo 64. I'm talking to Mr. Grant Kirkhope. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Like I said, it's a Friday. The dogs are barking. The daughter's taking a nap. I don't think it can get any better than that. So, as a little bit of an icebreaker, I wanted to ask, what is the best beverage on this planet, and why is it Nog?
I don't know. It just is the best, unfortunately. But I have to ration myself to December only, because otherwise I'll just have a huge cholesterol problem and I won't be around. So it's 31 days of Nog, and that's it.
It's just 31 days.
31 sweet days.
I remember. I think it was about the time frame for it. I went to Twitter. And I saw your username hadn't changed yet. And I was like, I made the comment, and I think it was like 10 minutes later it changed. I was like, yes, I impacted society in some way today.
Definitely.
All right, so your earliest, if we go way back in time to your life, long before Rare, how did you enter with music? I think the guitar was one of the big things that you picked up.
Yeah, that was later. So I started recording when I was 4.
Wow.
And I played trumpet when I was 6, and I did a proper classical trained trumpet player. So I kind of self-taught guitar player about 11. But I was I did the properly trained trumpet player thing.
So for me, I was kind of force-fed the piano as a kid, and I always found it interesting how if you could play the piano, you could basically pick up any instrument if you understood the scales. So I have 5 kids, and I'm slowly teaching them instruments as well. And my son has a guitar.
Yeah, I know. I know a lot of people who got forced to play the piano and then just gave up. So I think you have to want to. I think forcing your kids to do it doesn't do any good, because they just resent it. They have to want to do it.
It's the same with trying to learn a language, or really any extracurricular. You have to have some motivation, because if you don't, it's...
Yeah.
It's like
both my kids started playing trumpet and then both gave up. I didn't encourage or discourage. I just tried to help them out. But they both did play it for a while, then quit.
Yeah, and so you, what was your role in the Big Bad Horns?
I was a trumpet player. So Little Angels, the band that was, were friends of mine for a good while before I played for them. And I knew the manager very well. He had a small label years ago before he managed Little Angels, and I was signed to the label, but one of the metal bands I was in put a record out, 2 records out with him, with a band called Maniacs, and then it kind of fell to pieces. And then I joined a band called Zoot and the Roots, which were like a soul funk band, and I played trumpet for them for many years, like good 7 years or so. And they were like a proper working band, 3-4 gigs a week. It was pretty full on. We did some pretty big things, and TV stuff and all sorts. But Little Angels knew of that band and knew of me, and we were friends through the same manager guy. So they said, we'd like to do one record with horns. So me and my mate Frank Meisen on trombone. So we played for that one record, and it did well. And so we ended up becoming kind of part of the band and doing all the touring stuff and playing the records and what have you.
And that was only one of the bands, because you had another one. Was it Sire and the Maniacs? Was that the whole...
Sire was the first one. That was the first metal band. We were signed to the Belgian metal label Mausoleum. We put one record out called Death Before Dishonor. And then we signed to Power Station with Kev Nixon, who was the manager of Little Angels and owned the label at the time before he managed Little Angels. And we put out 2 Maniacs albums with them. And also, Kev Nixon had a another label called Indiscreet, which was kind of a pop side of the metal label. Zoot and the Roots were on that label, and so I played for them on trumpet to do them a favour because their home players had quit or something. So Kev Newt played trumpet from being a classically trained trumpet player, and so me and Frank, who was an engineer, who engineered some of the demos of those local bands in that area, played trombone, and so he stuck us together, and we ended up playing for Zoot and the Roots, and ended up playing for them for quite a long time, and then ended up playing in Little Angels too.
And through the connection of being in bands, is that how you met Robin Beanland, or is that someone that you already knew?
No, it was, yeah. So we were like in our local bandy area of like Harrogate, York area in North Yorkshire in the UK. So Robin was in a band called Brazil, and the drummer from Sire and Maniacs was called Nigel Harrison, and he ended up being the singer of Brazil, the band. And so we got to know, and my bands got to know them, and we all became friends. Robin was a keyboard player, and then that's how I got to know him.
Awesome. So early years, it's just music. It's just music. How do you come across this epic little company called Rare in
Well, that was Robin, right?
mid-90s, I think?
Yeah, so Robin and I were friends for many years, and he announced one day he'd got a job, and like no one that I knew got a job. All my friends just played in bands, really, and that's what we did.
Oh, that's a job.
Well, not at the level that I did it at. I mean, playing Little Angels was pretty big deal, and Zoot made money and all that. But it was hardly a job, and I got to like 32, and Little Angels had split, and I'd left Zoot and the Roots, and I was kind of playing in just local pub rock bands, making £35 a night, I guess about $50. And so, that's what I did, still living at home with my mother at 32, which is not good. And so Robin announced he'd got a job, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. What are you going to do? So I'm going to go and work for a video games company writing music. I was like, God, that's a job. I didn't even realize that was a job. And so he'd been there about a year and a half and said to me, Grant, you've been on and off unemployment benefit for like 11 years because I left university at 22 after finishing my trumpet degree and all that. And said, don't you think it's time you got a job? I was like, well, what can I do? He said, well, why don't you try do what I'm doing, writing music for video games? I said, well, I guess I could have a go. And I played a lot of games at the time. So he recommended buy a bit of equipment, like a Proteus Effects, EMU Proteus Effects synthesizer, a copy of Cubase, an Atari ST, some speakers. I use my hi-fi speakers at home and what have you. And just sat in my bedroom and writing music that I thought was appropriate for video games, and sent Rare 5 cassette tapes over the course of about a year, I guess 1995-ish. Just prior, probably a bit before that, and into 1995. I never got a reply, and then still in contact with Robin all the time. And then out of the blue, got a letter saying please come for an interview. So I drove down to Rare, I guess about 100 miles, maybe a bit further. I can't think how far it is, from where I was in North Yorkshire, then in the Midlands in the UK, in Twycross. And Dave Wise and Simon Farmer, who was the general manager, interviewed me. And I was on a Friday, got a letter on the Monday saying I got the job. Couldn't believe it. So packed up my stuff, said goodbye to my mother, and off I went down to live in Coleville, which is very near Twycross, where Rare was, and start work there, which was just the craziest thing, really. If Robin had never done it or suggested it, I would never have done it. Like, if he'd never have thought to do that, I'd still be in Harrogate now, an old man playing in shitty rock covers bands, making no money and basically being a tramp.
Well, it's so interesting that you came in at the time that you did for Rare. So on my Twitch stream right now, one of my community members changed the active project where I'm playing games from Rare. And let me tell you, early Rare games, it's like tap dancing on a minefield. So you came in at the right time, because once the 90s rolled around, like Rare games, Killer Instinct 2, Gold, and Donkey Kong Land 2, and GoldenEye 007, which was my first exposure to your music. I know that if I remember right, I think you did the conversion for Donkey Kong Land 2.
Yeah, I just converted Dave Wise's music from the SNES to work on the original Game Boy. That was hard, that was. That was my first job when I got to Rare. And then Graham Norgate, who was, I hasten to add, like, Rare were mega successful prior to being Rare, right? Because they were Ultimate Play the game. So they had made a ton of money already making Spectrum games,
Oh yeah, Jetpack.
So yeah, massive. So they had the magic touch from the start, and then they just chose to quit making those games and reverse engineer the NES so they could write a game for it and sent it to Nintendo. Couldn't believe that anybody could have done that. So they were stellar already, right? So they were, to have that ability. Anyway, that's besides the point. But I got to Rare, and Graham Norgate was doing Blastcore and Ken Griffey baseball on the SNES and Blastcore on the 64. So he got really busy with us. Said, could you take over doing GoldenEye? I said, well, I'd love to do that, And so it was agreed that I did the Game Boy in the morning and GoldenEye in the afternoon.
So the one of the most well-known themes ever, and of course you have incredible credits. I mean, you're multi-award winning, multiple scope across the world, winner of awards, BAFTA, all these other organizations. They're just acronym alphabet soup. But GoldenEye, I think the pause theme is the most infamous and probably well-known piece of music that wasn't created by someone like Nobuo Uematsu or Tim Follin or Koji Kondo on a Nintendo platform. And that's impressive. But I wanted to, what was the creative direction for that? Because I don't know. That was my ringtone for a little bit.
There wasn't any creative direction. It was just, when you come to write, back then when I came to write a pause music tune, it was just like, this is something that you just stick on while the person goes to the bathroom or gets a cup of coffee or goes on the pizza or whatever. No one cares about pause music, right? It's just something to play while the game's paused. It's not important. So it took me like 15 to 20 minutes, if that, to write it. It's just the Bond theme with the Bond chords. And I just decided to put that kind of hip hop beat with it. Because hip hop was, a gigantic force. So it's still a gigantic force now, but I guess it was really coming into its own in the 90s. And so I just picked up on that drum beat and stuck it together and forgot about it. So, it's pretty crazy that people have gone so daft over it these days. And I don't quite know what it is. It's just one of those things, right? I mean, as I say, I got contacted by Babyface Ray, who's quite a well-known rapper over here, Detroit rapper, and he wanted to use it for a song. So I said, you have to talk to Rare to get the license. And so, but I said, they're going to say no because Rare always say no to everything like that. So he asked them and they said no. And he came back to me and said, can you recreate it? So the law is if you recreate something from scratch, it can sound exactly like it, but it's considered a cover version. And as long as you pay the original publishers a little royalty, it's completely legal to do it. So I recreated it and sent it to him, and it all went quiet. I thought he's forgot about it. But lo and behold, he made a track out of it. So it's called Count Money, featuring Bossman D-Lo. And it's out currently now. If you go to Babyface Ray's page on Spotify, I think it's his 8th most popular track. It's had like 3 million plays on Spotify. But it's me, so I'm credited as a producer on that track because I provided the.
That's awesome.
It's pretty crazy to think that something like that turned up,
Yeah, and I think that the first game I ever played that had your influence was Banjo-Kazooie, because Christmas 98 on my channel I talk about all the time, because every Christmas is epic when you're a kid, but it's even more epic when you get your own video game console and your first small library of games. And for me, it was Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time and Mario Kart 64 and Super Mario 64. Banjo-Kazooie was the big one. And it's funny because I actually bought a cameo from you for one of my friends who was in the hospital.
All right.
And your identity is always, it seems like anytime you do any public speaking or you're doing a favor for anybody on cameo, you're always whipping out the "wah-hey" and all of the other sound effects. But I do want to spend some time on Banjo-Kazooie because I feel like that was one of the heaviest, at least before like Perfect Dark and some of the other stuff that you worked on, Viva Pinata. Banjo-Kazooie was, in my opinion, the biggest deal, if that makes sense. And I do have a few questions about it. In your compositions, are you big on using motifs? Because if in Banjo-Kazooie, for all accounts, most of the music in the game is just a reimagining of the same thing. And I feel that once we go inside of Grunty's lair and we're going to all of these subworlds, that the themes that you're choosing are just remishmashes that fit the ambiance of the environment that we're in. I don't know if you could expand on that.
Yeah. So as you wander around Grunty's lair, Greg Mayles, the lead guy in the game, said, as you wander to, we had all that channel fade stuff going, right? So if you, as you wander towards the area of the next level, wouldn't it be cool to have that tune in that kind of Grunty's Lair style? So that was like, as you got wandered towards the thing, it would fade to that version of the music, so it would sound a bit like Mummer's Mountain or a bit like Fiji Peaks or whatever. So that was the thing, you know, that thinking behind that. You know, for me, leitmotif is the gold standard in music writing. You know, composition. That's the way I think about it. Not everyone thinks like me, but that's how I think. I guess I'm brought up in the, you know, in those years of, you know, the movies where every movie had a gigantic theme and you remember it forever. Whether it was the Battle of Britain or the Guns of Navarone or Star Wars or Harry Potter or you name it, right? That was my era of movies that I remember the most because they've got all these epic themes that you never forget, right? And so I wanted to do that. So anything that I write from my, in fact, this is my 30th year composing for composing full stop, right? I started in 1995. This is my 30th year. So in all the 30 years that I've written music, I've always tried to write a theme that you can remember. I might not always succeed, but that's in my head. So that's my absolute goal every time. And so Banjo-Kazooie was the first game that I got to write all the music and do all the sound effects. So I remember Tim Stamper came to see me and said to me something along the lines of, "All right, Grant, this game is all yours. Don't F it up." That was his exact words. And when the boss tells you not to F it up, you have to not F it up. And so I did my best. I tried to find something that I thought was a bit quirky, a bit oddball, a bit different to other music that I'd heard. It wasn't that kind of Nintendo poppy jazz, which is fantastic, that I can't do at all. So there's no point me trying to copy that because Koji Kondo is fantastic at that, and I haven't got a hope in hell of copying that. And so I just had to find something that I thought was, I don't know, a bit more me. And I felt like, you know, it suited me. I thought, just try to find a quirky, oddball, Tony Umpire, Danny Elfman, whatever you want to call it. And just, you know, you cross your fingers, right? And in those days, there was no internet, or it was very early days, so you didn't get reviews on the internet. You waited for the magazines to review stuff. So you had to wait a month, you know, to see what the reviews said. You didn't know what people thought about the game. So I didn't know that people were going to like it. I thought people might hate it. It was a bit quirky, a bit daft, a bit weird. Maybe people weren't going to like it. So it's super humbling that people still talk about the music to Banjo-Kazooie. Pardon me. And, you know, all these years later. And I don't know, what can I say? Maybe I did something right for once in my life.
But how did it feel? Like, so we're going back then. You see the first reviews, or you hear your friends talking about it, and you're like, the bird and bear game. Like, how did it feel that first time? Because we know that you're still incredibly humble. You just mentioned that. But how did it feel back then to see, holy crap, this people love this?
I don't think I really knew. Like, Rare was a very secretive company, right? They didn't like to do any interviews. They didn't want any contact with the outside world. Tim and Chris Stamper, well, the whole Stamper family are very famously very news shy. They don't want to get involved in any kind of, I can't get the word, notoriety. Well, not notoriety. They don't want to talk to anybody about anything. It was when Tim used to always say, "We're not pop stars. We make games. The games do the talking," you know, and that's how it was. So we never did any interviews. We didn't talk to anybody, and so half the time we didn't know what was really going on in the outside world because we were all sort of in our little bubble of Twycross in the Midlands in this manor farmhouse, just making these video games and not really, and that's all we did. We didn't think about anything else. It was like everyone was
strictly business, no ego.
Well, yeah, it was just, that's the way it was. It was like, you know, the games do the talking and that's it. Why do we need to do any other talking? Why do we need the staff to say anything? We don't do any interviews, that's it. Not because we're arseholes, just because we don't want to do that. We want the games to exist by themselves without any influence from us, kind of thing. So I don't think I really knew how big Banjo or any of the games had become. I guess not really until I moved to America in 2008. When I went to my first MagFest, I was like, oh, people seem to know who I am. I was like, that's a bit bizarre, you know. So it was a bit. That's just the way Rare was.
So for Banjo-Kazooie, you not only you had complete executive control over, you know, sound effects and stuff. What was
well, hang on. So I wouldn't say that. So, you know, Greg Mayles was the head of the game, right? So he had final say on everything. art, code, you name it, right? So if he didn't like something that I did, he'd ask me to change it. So it wasn't like executive control. I wrote the music that I wanted to write, but if he didn't like it, I'd change it, or the sound effect wasn't right, I'd change it. So, you know, the book stops at the head of the game always. Oh, that's the way it should be, in my opinion. And so he had complete control.
So what was the sound breakdown for like Mumbo and Banjo? Did you do all those voices? I've always been curious.
So Chris Sutherland, who was the lead programmer on the Donkey Kong Country games 1 and 2, and Banjo-Kazooie, and that team stuck together after that. So we did Grab by the Ghoulies and Banjo-Tooie and all that. And so Chris was the voice of Kazooie and Banjo. I did Mumbo Jumbo, the Jinjos, quite a lot of baddies.
You did the Jinjos?
Yeah, I did the Jinjos. Yeah, Jinjo, that's me. So, and a lot of the other noises was probably just me, I think, by myself, just making, because it's quick, and there wasn't a lot of memory space to make a lot of noise anyway. So but Mumbo was my main voice, I guess.
And as we go on, we've got Banjo-Tooie. Did you find it interesting to be working on a direct sequel to a project that you invested time in?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you expected a sequel because that's the way things went to this day. People still do sequels, right? If it's a success. And so, but I guess we all wanted to make it bigger, better, faster, stronger, the rest of it, So I guess I feel like Banjo-Tooie is like making it twice the size doesn't make it twice as good, right? So I always felt like it was maybe a little bit bloated. But musically, I got to do a lot more because we found a way of sticking 2 MIDI files together. So we had 32 channels instead of just 16. So I could do more with the music and more channel fades, all that kind of thing we did in the first game. So, and I tried to write catchy tunes if I could again. So, and when we got to the boss piece, I went, right, I'm really going to go for it because I loved writing the boss music in the first game. It was, we were all thinking it was great.
Moving forward, you did a bunch of things: the Iba Ninja Gaiden Z or Z, Castle of Illusion.
We don't mention that.
Yeah, I was about to say. So we don't mention Nuts and Bolts then either.
No, I can mention that. That's all right.
So from my generational perspective, Nuts and Bolts was Microsoft taking what we loved and throwing it away. That's just the way that we saw it.
It wasn't really Microsoft's fault. It was, the Greg and the people that designed the game. That's what they wanted to design. And as a member of staff, you do what your head of game tells you to do.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. I used to work for EA, so I get it.
Yeah, you get it. So, and Greg and Tim are very they don't like to look back too much. They want to keep moving ahead and in fact doing new stuff, right? So that's why I feel there was never a Banjo 3 because Greg couldn't think of what more can we do with it. It's been done twice. What more can we do? We split the characters up in the second game, give them more abilities. What more can you do? The story's kind of run its course, right? So the initial pitch for doing Banjo, the Nuts and Bolts, was to do the original game as a co-op. So to take Banjo-Kazooie, make it into a co-op, redo all the levels to make it look up to date and all great. Redo the sound, redo the whole thing, but make it a co-op. And then we were all a bit like, So a lot of the artists said, it takes the same amount of time to retexture the old game as it is to make a new game. It's just the same, right? It's no difference. So why wouldn't we make a new game? And at the time, Rare had bought in this physics engine called Havoc, which was the first time Rare had bought an engine in. They'd always used Rare made their own engines. Every team made its own engine. There wasn't one Rare. Well, there was one Rare engine later on, but I guess not all the teams used it. Everyone did their own engine, which is a bit crazy looking back at it now that we all did our own engine for the game. You'd think you use one like Unreal or something, like you make one engine and all use it. And so there was a demo for Havoc was like these blocks you could knock about in the game and all the impacts, and that gave Greg the idea of putting the blocks together to make these cars and any kind of contraption you wanted to make in the Nuts and Bolts, right? So that was the thing that hooked him into doing it like that. And I will say about Nuts and Bolts, people do tend to kind of not like it because it's Banjo-Kazooie, and I think perhaps would have been better if it hadn't been Banjo-Kazooie and something else as a main IP. But my son was little, 5 or something like that when we came to America, and when his friends came over to play, they all wanted to play Nuts and Bolts. That's the only game they wanted to play because they'd never heard of Banjo-Kazooie before. They didn't know about the first 2 games, never heard of it, and they loved the building aspect. They can make any contraption they wanted to make, and that's all they wanted to do. And I mean, it showed me that the whole mechanic of it all, the idea behind it was a great idea. I mean, really, it predates Minecraft, right? Because you can make whatever you want, right? It is a bit like Minecraft. You can stick your stuff together, make submarines and cars and planes and you name it, right? So to me, watching my son's friends go crazy over it was like, oh, this is a good game. So I just think that having it pitched as Banjo-Kazooie soured it a little bit, and kind of people, there was still the Nintendo fanboy person that didn't like the fact that Rare had sold itself to Microsoft, right? And we only brought one game out on the Xbox, grabbed by the Ghoulies, because that's all we had. Microsoft bought Rare because they wanted them to provide broad appeal content, because they had Halo, they had dark titles, they wanted some light titles, but Rare was not that big a company, maybe 100 people maybe at the time, and maybe 120 and something like that. So I mean, we couldn't provide enough content. You can't make that many games because it was back in the N64 days, it was 15 people a team, roughly about that. But as the consoles got bigger, the teams got bigger, so it got harder to make games. Everything got slower, right? So I feel like we couldn't possibly make the amount of games to provide the broad appeal content that Microsoft wanted. So that was a problem. But the Nuts and Bolts thing, I just think there's nothing wrong with the game. It was just the Banjo-Kazooie thing attached to it. The fanboys didn't want to go near it because it wasn't another platform game like they wanted.
This is the end of part 1 of the interview with Mr. Kirkhope. Keep an eye out for the second part. I should have it out today or tomorrow, so keep a lookout for it. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.